I actually got this from a kid's toy store. I wonder how hard it is. One of the biggest payoffs you can have in any story you write is your hero defeating the bad guy. This has been a staple in fiction since storytelling began. The make or break moment of this payoff actually comes down to how compelling your villain is. At the end of the day, if your antagonist is not that much of a threat, then what kind of victory has your hero actually achieved? So I'm here to give you some examples and some tips on how to write a convincing villain. As always, I don't have the tech yet to put anything up on screen, so get ready with pen and paper and start taking some damn notes. Professional mode. Point number 1, your villain's mindset. This is normally divided between one common denominator: empathy or lack of. People that lack empathy are normally self-driven and narcissistic, which can make them incredibly dangerous because they have no fear, shame or guilt for any of their actions. It's incredibly similar to an actual psychopath because everything they do is to serve them, themselves and their own agenda, regardless of the rippling consequences and who else they may touch. Writing these villains is actually kind of fun because you can do wild things with them, making them completely unpredictable. And when it comes to your reader, this is a truly unsettling and suspenseful experience. At the other end of the narcissistic spectrum is another kind of villain you can write. Maybe someone who isn't so off wild and predictable, but someone more cold, calculating and ruthless. The planner. Someone who foresees every event whilst obtaining what they want and managing to stay under the radar. John Doe from Seven is a great example of this. He didn't get caught until he wanted to get caught, which also furthered his own plan later on in the movie. But where you have unhinged and unpredictable assholes of the non-empathy variety, you can have villains out there who have an understanding and even a regret of what it is that they're doing, displaying the emotion empathy. Characters like Thanos and Ozymandias from the Watchmen movie, not that shit TV show, are a couple of standouts when it comes to this example. Both are very well aware of their actions and they know that it's going to cause a lot of harm, a lot of death, but they're doing it for the bigger picture, you know, the greater good and all that. What makes these kind of antagonists so scary is that they can't be talked down or see wrong with what they're doing with their actions or also their ideals. Kind of like half you fuckwits on Twitter. But at the end of the day, they will destroy anyone and anything to achieve their goal. Self-righteousness is an incredibly powerful and destructive tool. And if there is enough pride in your antagonist's soul in terms of what they believe in and what they're doing, only the act of killing them will stop them. This makes them incredibly powerful because there is only one way to stop whatever horrors they are putting on the world. So when it first comes to creating your antagonist, the first thing you need to do is establish what it is that drives them and what they're willing to do to achieve it. And you don't necessarily have to even stick to the whole narcissist against the whole self-righteous trait. You can do a blend of both. Again, harking back to John Doe from Seven. An incredibly vicious and calculating killer, as aforementioned, who only got caught because he wanted to, because at the end of the day, it was not about his pride, but it was about his bigger picture, his servitude to God. Point number 2, your villain's power set or skills. John Kramer from Jigsaw was an incredibly skilled and experienced engineer, which is what helped him create the traps in the Saw movies. Ramsay Bolton was a power-hungry bastard who had access to his dad's army, which is how he gained his rise to power. And Ezra Miller is mentally disabled, which is why you're not allowed to tell them what an absolute prick they are. Small side note, if anyone out there thought I was just taking the piss out of someone's mental health, then you clearly don't know a thing about me. I am allowed to point out that Ezra Miller is a complete fuckwit, and if they ever found a grain of sand in the desert, they would think it was fucking rice. The reason you have to build fundamentals when it comes to your villain's criteria or resume is because it adds believability, not just to what they can do, but also within the consistency of the world you're building as well. With this, you will add up layers and layers, and it actually makes it more suspenseful knowing what could be in store for your main characters. If you have something random out there, it doesn't really work. For example, if I told you Edward Scissorhands was a great ventriloquist, it doesn't really line up, does it? Establishing these skill sets Establishing these skill sets actually gives your protagonist something to fear, but also a way to defeat them. Because no matter how powerful anyone is, there is always a chink in the armour. Giving your main character a plot to find the chink in the armour to defeat the bad guy will help add layers to them. And if you want to know more about building up your main characters, see one of my last videos. It's somewhere in the Writing Tings playlist. Point number 3, backstory or no backstory. And for this, we're going to compare 2 different portrayals of one of the most globally well-known villains out there, the Joker. The first one we'll be looking at is Heath Ledger's performance in The Dark Knight, 2008. And I'm pretty sure that we've all seen this movie and we all know this performance very, very well. There are still today questions and debates about that Joker's origin story, and I quite like the one where he's a former soldier who was injured in the line of duty, who is now lashing out at society. All the way through The Dark Knight, it is enforced that this Joker has no cohesive backstory whatsoever. Even his clothes have no identifiable origin. Even the Joker himself switches up the stories of how he got the scars on his face. This is terrifying on its own because it's a real sense of anarchistic, nihilistic behaviour, because you cannot pinpoint what his past was, so his next move is completely off the table and unpredictable, whether it's seemingly calculated or just pure violence. You want to keep your reader suspenseful, so if you're going to create this kind of villain with no backstory, you can go as crazy as you want with them. Comparing that to 2019's The Joker, played by Joaquin Phoenix, you have a very, very different backstory. The plotting and pacing for this becoming of Joker story is kind of tragic. It's horrible to watch this lonely person suffering from mental health conditions being manipulated through life, lied to and beaten down by society, to the point of where he's left with no other options, or as he says in a very famous scene in it, nothing left to lose. And the reason that this backstory works is because when he does finally become the Joker, you neither condone his actions nor condemn them. It's a great way to get an insight into what actually makes a person the way they are. And I'm going to cover this a little bit in point 5 as well. But 2019's Joker is one of the most perfect backstories or origin stories out there, from taking your everyday person just trying to get through life and turning them into a globally known monster. I know some weirdos out there said that that movie promoted incels and, you know, Andrew Tate lifestyle, and it's okay to lash out society and all that shit. You know, some people have said it's like an adult version of, you know, a school shooting, but at the end of the day, when it's put in front of you like that and it's established that that is what some people go through, the reason it connects with the viewer, in this case, not the reader, is because we can feel it, because we see it every day. Writing an origin story for your villain can work, and again, if done right, will make them more terrifying when you realise what it is that they've actually already overcome. When it came to my first book, The Taste Beneath, #ad, I added enough of a backstory for the villains just so I could justify their actions, but I wanted more to keep my main character more in the dark, if that makes sense. There wasn't too many layers of an origin story in that one in particular. In my second book, Diseased Intentions, I added more of a backstory, and this is not done with the intention, diseased intention, to add a layer of sympathy. In fact, the backstory that I gave, or the hint of a backstory, I left completely ambiguous and more subjective to the reader of where you could understand where they were coming from or not. Point number 4, their page or screen introduction and the consistency of following through with that. And to begin with this, we're going to do 2 comparisons from the same franchise. It's late. And standing at the top of the food chain when it comes to villain intros, I think we all know Darth Vader's entrance at the beginning of A New Hope. This might as well be the staple for villain introductions, as it plays every kind of trick in the book it can on you. You know, he's tall, dressed in all black, his face is hidden, he's stepping over bodies, and he's got that deep just voice that buries its way into your skin. As Negan once said, a voice you can't unhear. From the get-go, you know not to mess around with him and that he's not going to cut any corners when it comes to achieving his goal, even killing someone within the first few minutes of screen time. This level of power continues all the way through the trilogy, even at the end of The Empire Strikes Back, where he's just toying with and mocking his son, even mutilating him in the process. And even at the end of Return of the Jedi, him losing to Luke is a win for him, as he's managed to push his son into that dark place and hopefully to the dark side. That is the only real battle he loses, and it was because he wanted it to happen. But all the way through this trilogy, you don't ever once feel that he's going to lose a fight. He is a real threat. Now let's consider his grandson, Kylo Ren. And for all the people, as I always bitch on Star Wars sequels, this is not a bitch, by the way. This is just pure fact of what we see on screen. His intro is very much beat for beat when it comes to Darth Vader's. He enters halfway through a battle, dressed in all black, his face is covered, he has that distorted voice. He kills someone and he even manages to stop a laser bolt being blasted at him. We had never seen that level of the Force before. And this was, in your face, going to be the new Darth Vader. And it worked up until, what's his name? Poe Dameron. I fucking hate the sequels. When Poe Dameron starts mocking him openly in front of all of his troops, and he instantly loses power or that fear factor to him when he does not retaliate or strike him down. And then through the rest of the series, he loses pretty much every fight that he's in. And this kind of, compared to Darth Vader, there was no fear factor with him. It was lost pretty much from the get-go. The personality you establish at the beginning should match all the way through your plot, no matter how many books you're writing. And you should add layers and layers into it throughout their experience, as you would do with your main character. But if you have to weaken them just to serve your plot, then you need to go back to the drawing board. Don't sacrifice their presence or mystique just to make the next part of your story easier to write. They won't be seen as a threat, they will lose all suspense, and it's not very engaging, and it's very paper thin to watch someone who should be powerful and a threat to then crumbling down just because you were needed or wanted to get onto a next part or something that makes your main character's life much easier. Small side note, thinking about it, I'd say Thanos in Infinity War has one of the best villainous intros ever. If you consider that, you know, he killed half the Asgardians, killed Loki, defeated Hulk in hand-to-hand combat. Yeah. Maybe watch the beginning of Avengers Infinity War, and that is how to introduce a character. Point number 5. Understanding their motivation or goal. It's easy to write evil when you're looking at it from the outside, and it's also easier to take real life traits or beliefs that you don't agree with and slap them onto an antagonist. At the end of the day, no one is the villain in their own story. I mean, if you look at Ian Watkins, who still to this day doesn't understand what everyone got so worked up about, and even, I'm going to say, all of the genocides in history, whether they're modern, last century or millennia ago, were all carried out under the guise of an actual goal. There was, even if the goal was hatred, there's still a goal. And that's why when it comes to having these evil characters, you do actually have to do some real life research to get into the mindset of understanding what it is that can make people do this on such a hateful level. And take it from me, you will go down some paths and discover things that humans are capable of that will make your skin crawl. When it comes to writing villains and your story, it's important that you have a hold and a firm grip on what their beliefs are. You do not have to believe in it, but you have to be in their mindset and understand why they're doing these things and why they believe it's the right thing to do. If you write someone who's nasty for the sake of being nasty, it doesn't really hold that weight, and it's also not as satisfying when they're killed. Even if you look at Joffrey from Game of Thrones, who is someone who made me wanting to punch the TV screen every time he was on, even he had a goal. It's not the most honourable goal ever, like most of their villains aren't, but he was just an entitled little prick who had no respect for anybody. Not the greatest goal in the world, but it fully underlines his motivation and it translates well on the screen. I've not read the books, so I don't know if that's the case, But knowing that that was his mindset is just visually easier to take in. I don't know if I put that into words well or not, but I think you get what I mean. It's a scary process going down that path of doing this research into these kinds of people. And there are some where you actually look at what it was that they were setting out to do, and it can make you question your own beliefs at times. Even if you're firmly bold and within yourselves, when you understand the way the mind works for these kind of people, it's a dark path. It's a dark path. I've got another sort of example here, but it's not really about villains. But this is something that, as I've got older, I rewatch it and it's hard to pick what I would choose. If you've ever seen the true story, The Lone Survivor, there is this debate scene about whether the team should execute or release some hostages or goat farmers that they've come across. I used to be fully for letting them go. I think they did the right thing, but now as I've got older and maybe I'm a bit more cynical, the back and forth that they have, which is acted out of this world, by the way, and I don't know if this is how it happened in that actual real life event, but it's so compelling because both sides are not from an evil point of view. I think you just have to watch it. If you get a chance, YouTube Lone Survivor debate scene, just trust me, in terms of getting into different mindsets, that is the ultimate go-to of watching a conflicting opinion going back and forth and putting yourself in an uncomfortable situation to see other people's sides of the story. At the end of the day, a believable villain is a scary villain. And point number 6, I'm not really going to talk into this too much because I think I might do a whole separate video for it, but this is just something to get your mind working once you've figured out the first 5 points, is establishing your villain's personality. And the reason I say this now, because it clicked into my head, and I mentioned on Instagram that I love villains, but there are some that stand out more. Negan being one, Homelander from The Boys, Ramsay Bolton from Games of Thrones, all despicable people, but the second they are on the screen, I can't take my eyes off them. It's not just the acting performances, it's the way they were written, and it's almost done with that comedic undertone that you have to invest yourself in it. If you think I should do a separate video for establishing your villain's personality, let me know out in the comments. I'm probably going to do the video anyway, but if you want to see something else regarding villains, let me know in the comments. But this has been your boy Pembroke's Own. It's been great to do this video and do some more writing things for you aspiring writers out there. If you're new here, please subscribe. I'm currently uploading once a week, so one week I'll do a camera video like this, and the next one you'll get a podcast of me talking over some gaming footage with my boys Team RPG. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like and a comment if you want to see anything more in the future. This has been my first year on YouTube. It's been a learning experience. I'm hopefully going to get some more tech and a better editing software so I can put stuff up on screen. But yeah, this will be my last video before Christmas comes. So Merry Christmas. Hope you've all had a great 2023. Can't wait to see what 2024 brings for you. This is late now, so I'm going to end the video. As always, much love. Take care. Peace.